Hello and welcome back to Perspectives. On today's show, we have our usual roundup of the big stories around the world relevant to the Sikh community, and then we'll take a look in more detail at a couple of more stories. Firstly, the fallout continues after the Sikh truck driving tragedy in Florida, as the story mushrooms across the US. Sikh organisations are now stepping in, appealing for calm and, of course, common sense. More on that in a moment. And the British government once again is facing the wrath of the nation's Sikh community for its continuing abject failure to fairly represent or even care about our large Sikh population. British Labour often talk about representing hard-working families, but evidently not hard-working Sikh families. Anyway, all this and more on today's show. But joining me, as always, is our very own correspondent in Canada, James Cousineau. Good morning, James.
Good morning, Angus, and good morning to our viewers out there. Thanks again for all the amazing comments. Of course, stick around to the end of the show to see if your comment makes it onto the program. We are also just encouraging you to check out our link tree, and you can find out how to support the station and the network, but also where you can find us on other platforms. So keep the word spreading, let everybody know about us, and thanks for joining us once again. Back to you, Angus.
Indeed, and James and I together will be bringing you our perspectives on the daily news affecting the Sikh community across the world. And indeed, as usual, we'll take a look at loads of your great comments at the end of the show, so do stay tuned for that. Right, James, let's get underway. What are you going to start us off with this morning?
Throughout India and Pakistan, along the border, especially in the Punjab region, the floodwaters continue to cause chaos. Now, with that said, there are accusations going by the people in Pakistan, not just the politicians, but the media and others who think that they are weaponizing the water system. Yes, they are accusing India of intentionally releasing water from the dams without a proper notification, causing devastating results downstream. However, with that said, there are other major stories going on that are related to these floods as well. And that includes a lot of people who were on pilgrimage and attending different activities at one of the Gurdwaras. Now, the Gurdwara Darbar Sahib in Kartarpur, and that's in Pakistan, has been inundated by the catastrophic floodwaters from the Ravi River. That said, there are, of course, as many people know, a lot of historical and significant items within the Gurdwara. Now, volunteers and others have gathered there to move all of those documents and all of those artifacts and everything else to the first floor from the ground floor, so they are safe from the waters. However, this is continuing to be a concern. Now, over 100 people were trapped at the Gurdwara at the time. The Pakistan government and the military did move in to airlift and rescue all of those people there. So the Gurdwara itself is flooding. Now they're estimating from 3 to 5 feet of water in the first floor and the lower level. However, on the main floor, not the first floor. They count it different than we do here in North America. But in any event, so those items have been, as I said, moved out of harm's way, and that is good news. They are also looking at the deluge of water in other parts of the Punjab region in Pakistan as well. And community leaders are coming together to thank the rescuers who are not only rescuing those volunteers and people that were stuck at the Gurdwara, but also in other regions of communities that were completely cut off from the rest of the travel corridors. And that also has closed down the Kartarpur corridor, which is a visa-free passage that connects the shrine to the Dera Baba Nanak in India's Gurdaspur region. And this is significant. They actually have shut it down. Some areas were shut down previously due to the conflict between India and Pakistan. However, at this time, it's more about safety with the catastrophic flooding. And of course, different levees or different regions can see just flash floods happen on a moment's notice. Out of an abundance of safety for anybody traveling, they have shut that down. But they are also monitoring it by air in case there were any people that were making the pilgrimage to the Gurdwara and have been stuck in between. So again, they continue the rescue efforts there. Now, of course, with the different people claiming that there are some political will involved in the way the waters were released in India, there are others within the Sikh diaspora who are in the Sikh community on both sides who are, instead of reflecting blame, talking about how both regions can come together to find long-term sustainable solutions, especially in the light of climate change, as they predict that these incidents may get worse as years come. So with that said, of course, the recognition and the importance of the rescuers, and to really appeal to people to give appreciation to those who are giving of themselves and potentially their lives to save others, is the biggest message coming out, of course, from the Sikh community, because they are one that wants to help everyone, that they want to step up with Seva and be there for all members of the community, not just the Sikh community. So I think that's important just to point out yet once again, because we've covered this at length, Angus. So very big of importance there. Now, key affected areas in Pakistan are the Norowal or the Kurdipar, as well as the Sialkot and Lahore, Kasur, Akora, and several other regions. In India, the Gurdaspur, the Pathankot, as well as several other areas, including, of course, Amritsar and Tarn Taran, and other regions as well. Now, the major rivers that are in Spain are the Ravi, the Chenab, and the Satluj, and that's in Pakistan. Over in India's side, it's the Ravi, the Beas, and the Satluj, of course. So with that said, official response is the mass evacuations in Pakistan of 190,000 people. And since this was put up, it's actually risen up to just over 200,000 people now in that count. And again, the Pakistan Army has been deployed for those rescue operations. Over in India, of course, the schools have been closed until, well, the 30th so far, but that could be extended if required. And of course, there's also still a high alert in multiple districts. The NDRF, as well as the SDRF and the Indian Army, have all also been deployed to the many regions impacted. So the impact on the Sikh sites, of course, we've talked about that, and both in India and in Pakistan, they are being affected. And the entire town of Dera Baba Nanak is being threatened by the rising Ravi River levels still. And of course, any of the properties and farmlands near the zero level will also be impacted if they haven't been already. So let's move forward, though. The sudden death of a prominent anti-Khalistan activist. Yes, we are usually talking about the Khalistan activists and moving forward with that, but there are a lot of conspiracies being brought forward, and some of them by the Hindutva, trying to place potential blame on his death on the Khalistan movement. Now, Suki Chahal had been over at a friend's at a friend's home for dinner back in early August, and he had been the founder of the Khalsa Today and chairman of the Punjab Foundation. Now, he was an activist in many ways in terms of looking at what he called propaganda being spread to Sikh youth, as well as, of course, he was anti-Khalistan in his messaging as well. Now, when he dropped dead just without notice at his friend's while he was having dinner, it was ruled a heart attack. However, the Hindutva media and others are trying to bring question into it and are demanding an investigation into his death, claiming that it may have been the Khalistan side who were malicious or nefariously involved. However, official voices have come to reason saying that it was clearly a heart attack. But again, the debate rolls on, and we have to be aware of course, the media that's involved, trying to, again, disparage the Sikh community that is fighting for a sovereign homeland of Khalistan. So we'll keep that in our minds as if an investigation is actually opened. But again, just more rhetoric coming out from the anti-Khalistan side. Now, in terms of updates on the attack in London, there are more people coming out that have video footage. and speaking out. But most importantly, here at Satellage, we wanted to send a special shout out to the ladies. And yes, it was the ladies that came to the aid of the two individual taxi drivers who were attacked viciously and racially motivated attack. So again, we wanted to just give a shout out. We don't know their names, but again, we want to make sure that the world recognizes these two heroes for stepping forward and helping these gentlemen in a time of need, and to really call out the powers that be to hold them accountable, the attackers that is, hold them accountable to the fullest extent of the law under hate crime legislation and other laws that can be enforced and brought to bear in this case. In terms of the political crosshairs of the Florida crash involving the Sikh driver, I'm going to leave that one, but I just wanted to point out that you want to stay tuned for Angus's report, as he will have more information on this devastating event as well. And tragic as it is, there are some positives coming out of it about trying to bridge the gap between communities. Now, as we speak of bridging gaps between communities, in South Africa, the Sikh community once again is bringing together Interfaith Harmony. They are holding an event that was called Bridging Beliefs. And they brought together people of all different faiths, trying to foster a cooperation and a clearer understanding of each other in order to break down barriers of racial injustice, to break down biases, and to open the lines of communication. We've seen these bridges of belief in places like Brampton, Ontario, and elsewhere. But again, this is massive because in Johannesburg, there is only one Sikh Gurdwara. And you can see that on your screen. A beautiful building on a hillside. So I could just imagine looking out from there. You probably have a wonderful view. And again, it just shows the leadership in communities around the world in how the Sikh diaspora is playing a central role in organizing all of these interfaith events, trying to bring communities together. And that's very important, I think, in today's world when we see so much polarizing of communities, so much divisiveness, so much pressure of people trying to push hate and separation. It just is really heartwarming to see communities coming together saying that the hatred has to stop, the bigotry, the racism, the anger that really is unfounded. It needs to be prevented, and this is one way to do it. Now, amazingly, over 300 religious leaders and community leaders came together there, and that is massive. That is a huge step forward. Now, again, as I said, they all came together, and that included members from the Christian faith, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, African traditional leaders, and so many others. So inspiring people to come together. With the numbers, I think that it has obviously spread around the world with these cooperations, and I hope to see more of it. Now, of course, the sentiment echoed, and people were noting that with great pride that one challenge South Africa does not have is interfaith conflict. And that, of course, is something that has happened in the past. But some say that they don't have it. Of course, they do to some level, but nowhere near the levels that we saw, decades ago. So it shows that it is possible for communities to come together, for faiths to be able to coexist, and to recognize the special opportunities or the special provisions of each one and how they can come together to make a community stronger and to make communities better. Over in Australia, meanwhile, community leaders are proactively addressing anti-immigrant sentiment. The Global Organization of People of Indian Origin, and that is a major diaspora organization in Australia, has written to the Prime Minister claiming that they have serious concerns of an anti-immigration protest coming up. Instead, they would like to see different activities that bring people together, such as we saw in the previous story of South Africa. They also want to remind the people of Australia, especially the political circles, how much of an impact that immigrants make within the community and the country, and how important they've been to bringing vital skill sets to the nation, helping to offset the challenge of an aging population. In addition, of course, whether it's infrastructure, education, business, they have been a major player in the development of all of these areas in the nation. And it is seen, of course, once again, that this is going to be a divisive event when it is anti-immigration, painting all immigrants with the same brush, and that is just unfair, unjust, and I believe, it should be something that is looked into as a hate-filled event. When you're looking at, once again, trying to paint everybody with the same brush, you end up with an ugly painting on your wall, and that's all it is. So with the history of Australia, let's hope that that ugly painting is not something we see forever etched in the books of the history. Moving forward, ladies and gentlemen, in British Columbia, yes, here in Canada, we are looking at a significant and proud moment for the Sikh community. Now, here in British Columbia, Vancouver stands as the international face of British Columbia and the West Coast. But with that said, Victoria is truly the heart of our province. Victoria is a very historic and beautiful city. It's also the capital of British Columbia, and of course home to not only our legislative assembly, but also many historic castles and hotels, and just an amazing place to visit. It's right on the Pacific Ocean, and of course, mile zero of the Trans-Canada Highway that goes from coast to coast is there in Victoria. Now, they are adding another badge of honor that is something to commemorate in Victoria besides all of those things I just listed, and that is the police chief retiring. Yes, the police chief, who is a Sikh in Victoria, British Columbia, has been honored with the retirement as he heads out the door, but he will be long remembered. August 27th has now been officially declared Delmanic Day. Chief Delmanic has served with pride and dignity in the Victoria Police Department and as chief for a long time, bringing together a community and helping to reduce crime rates and increase public awareness on crime prevention as well as other issues. So again, congratulations. Thank you for the service. And for now on, August the 27th will always be remembered as Delmanic Day, and he did the Sikh community very proud, but also the the entire country of Canada proud in his service. So thanks once again. The economic headwinds again are making news when it comes to the tariffs in India and the US with the trade war. It is continuing, but there is growing concern from the Sikh diaspora within the US. There are many within the import and export businesses who are really feeling the impact of this trade war. And not anytime soon do we think that it's going to recover because of the fact that when these tariffs are lifted, it's still going to take a seismic shift and time for things to get back to a regular basis. Many of the end users or retailers who rely on these importers had front-loaded their inventory, so they ordered ahead in anticipation of course, the tariffs being brought in. Therefore, it will delay any recovery for these businesses who are trying to absorb the new realities of trade. This also will have an impact on the side of the Sikh and other diasporas throughout the nation of the US, but also in turn it's going to have a major impact on suppliers and manufacturers in India as well. So hoping that it does not continue for too long. However, India is digging in their heels and fighting back, claiming that it is an unfair system, that these tariffs are unjust, and we'll see how that goes. But it is important that both sides find a resolution sooner than later to save all of the small businesses that definitely are being impacted in in the heart of America. And let's remember that small businesses represent the majority of employment as well as economic functions and economic drivers of the economy. So hopefully this doesn't last too long. Now, as always, you can find more on the stories that we've covered and a couple that we just breezed over here on the Substack page for Satellage TV. Yes, it is a place where you can watch and read up on these stories, but also that you can interact with us as well. In addition, you can always do that through the channel here and leave your comments because we love them, but also leave your opinions on the stories we cover. Back to you, Angus, and we'll move forward with tonight's show before I take all the time.
Indeed, yes. Do keep your comments coming. We do appreciate them, and we'll, as I say, talk about loads of comments at the end of the show. One area of which is relation to the story I want to just pick up on first of all, which is the sad flooding at the Kartarpur Darbar Sahib Gurdwara over the border in Pakistan. That place, it's always an evocative subject, is the Kartarpur Gurdwara. It is the most beautiful building. It's a fabulous looking building, and of course it carries a huge amount of heritage weight for the Sikh community, because it is, of course, the final resting place of the first Guru Nanak Dev Ji, which is why it forms such an important place of pilgrimage for so many Sikhs. And of course, post-partition 1947, it sadly fell on the wrong side of the border. If you were a Sikh living in Indian Punjab, it means you have to make an international crossing every time you want to go pay your respects to that Gurdwara. Now, interestingly, and this is an interesting angle on this story, because, and I'll talk about the flooding in a moment, of course, it's actually, Pakistan have actually bent over backwards to allow passage for Indian Sikhs to come and visit the Gurdwara. They have made it visa-free. There is this corridor which was actually negotiated between India and Pakistan to allow Sikhs to travel up what they call this corridor across the border up to the Gurdwara, and then they can return home back to Indian Punjab. So fantastic. But certainly in recent times, Pakistan have absolutely made every effort to allow access to Indian Sikhs to visit this holy place of worship. It's India who's actually made it extremely difficult. They actually closed the border at one stage to stop Indian Sikhs leaving India to go visit the Gurdwara. Now, this is reminiscent of the Soviet Union. In a normal democratic nation, you don't close your border. If somebody wants to leave your country, you don't close the border. Closing the border implies they are held hostage. This is what happened in communist countries under the Soviet Union. They had the Berlin Wall as a prime example of this. In other words, it implies that people who want to leave, you're not letting them leave. Why not? Because essentially you're holding them hostage. If they want to leave, they want to leave for a very good reason. And again, it has resonance of the Soviet Union. If India are actually preventing its own citizens from leaving their country to go visit a holy place of worship. So again, it's just another subtle indication of what sort of so-called democracy India has become. Anyway, that's another side. But of course, the flooding, it is tragic what's going on. And again, we'll talk about in the comments about the flooding, because of course, a lot of people have a lot of very strong opinions about the flooding. The causes, is it incompetence? Is it deliberate? We don't know. But anyway, we'll debate that shortly. But it is very sad to see this beautiful Gurdwara underwater. And of course, any damage is, it's not the first time it's flooded. Of course, sadly, every year we have this issue of the monsoon. It comes regular as geographical clockwork. It is predictable, and that's the point. The monsoon is predictable. It comes every single year. It always literally inundates that whole foothill area of the Himalayas. So they know this huge wall, this tsunami, this deluge, pick your word of choice, of water is going to flow down from the Himalayas right across this whole area. And what happens? Every year we have floods. Why? Again, it's back down to the mismanagement or the incompetence, whatever, from central government, from Delhi. And actually, ironically, as one of our commenters pointed out, it was Pakistan actually which saved much of Indian Punjab and certainly upstream areas by opening their dams and allowing the water to flow down rather than back up and causing dreadful flooding. So it was Pakistan, once again, ironically, who come to the rescue of Indian Sikhs and their region. It's not India itself. So read that into how you will. Now, the other area I wanted to pick up on, this Suki Chahal. I've not come across this guy before, and it's interesting to hear of his sad death. Of course, lots of speculation, but he's known as an activist, and he actually is the founder of something called the Khalsa Today. Now, I'd not heard of the Khalsa Today before, and I did a bit of sort of digging about the Khalsa Today. They, of course, have a website. They describe themselves as the leading global Sikh advocacy. Really? I mean, we can claim we are the leading pro-Khalistan channel. Yeah, it's easy. Anybody can make that claim. Is that true? Who knows? But they claim on their website they are the leading global Sikh advocacy. I can think of at least 10 organisations immediately, almost off the top of my head, who I would claim are leading global Sikh advocacies, and the Khalsa Today is not one of them. Anyway, it is a think tank. Oh yes, it's one of these think tanks. I'm always suspicious about think tanks. Who funds think tanks? Follow the money, one wonders. And I think if we follow the money of the Khalsa Today, it would be very interesting where that money actually comes from. Anyway, it is a think tank and non-profit media organisation, there's a clue there, media organisation, in the US. Their aim is to impact opinion and policy on the Sikh issues that matter most. Combating rising Sikh youth radicalisation, extremism. The clues are all there, isn't it? Defending Sikhs' place in the world, safeguarding the human rights and freedoms of all people. Interesting. In other words, the clue is really there. And if you look at their website, you just get a flavour of the sorts of things they talk about. Countering the fake and anti-Sikh Khalistan narrative. In other words, it's all about countering the Khalistan narrative. They're trying to talk about how the Khalistanis are becoming extremists, how the youth in the Sikh community is being radicalised for supporting Khalistan. Again, it all points to where the money's coming from. And again, I have absolutely no basis on this accusation. I can only join the dots and come up with my own conclusion. But it is very clear, looking at all the material they have on their websites, and do take a look, you'll form your own opinions. But very clearly, the Khalsa Today is essentially another mouthpiece of Hindutva. There's various stories supporting, for example, Mr. Suki Chahal's coverage on holy place where 3 Hindus sacrificed along with Guru Tegh Bahadur Sahib. In other words, it's very pro-Hindu. It's very anti-Khalistan, it's very pro-Hindu. Now, we know what that narrative, where the source of that general narrative comes from. It's not really from the Sikh community, I have to say. It's very usually from RSS-sponsored Hindutva organisations. So I suspect very strongly that the Khalsa Today is basically, it's just another mouthpiece of the RSS, probably funded, and this I'm only making speculation here, but all the evidence seems to point to that it is probably funded from India, and that they make no claims that they are pro-India. And again, they have that. This is their prerogative in a free democratic nation. Of course, they have this right to be pro-Indian and be anti-Khalistan. There is nothing wrong with that. But when of course a lot of this narrative, a lot of this propaganda hits the mainstream, people need to know who is funding this organisation. Of course, they're not transparent about that, and one does wonder where their money comes from. But anyway, so yeah, and I would say, and certainly, so his death. I mean, nobody celebrates anybody's death. Apart from extremes. But ultimately, this guy sadly passed away. It is most likely that it was a heart attack. Of course, people will speculate, certainly from the Hindutva side, he was murdered by Khalistani extremists. Honestly, I think if we look at the track record of Hindutva and we look at the track record of the Khalistan movement, how many assassinations have been perpetrated by the Khalistan movement in recent years? Really can't think of any. Yeah, there were accusations made in the 80s and the 90s, primarily as a response, a reaction to the dreadful genocides and persecution that the people had encountered during those years. But in recent years, it is a democratic movement. It does not need to resort to assassinating its critics. It doesn't need to. It's winning the argument. There's only one side that resorts to assassinating its critics, and we know which side that is. It's Hindutva, it's the Indian government. We only need to look at the conspiracy uncovered by the US government against Gurpatwant Singh Pannu, about the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar, about the potential probable murder of Avtar Singh Kandar in the UK, about various murders around Pakistan of Khalistani activists, etc., etc. There's only one side that sinks to assassinating its political rivals. It's certainly not the pro-Khalistan side, James. So yeah, again, very sad this guy's has lost his life or has passed away, but it is most likely it was just one of those things. It probably was a heart attack. Yes, people do die of natural causes on a regular basis. It is very, very unlikely that he was the subject of any sort of Khalistani assassination attempt.
That's right.
Right, James, let's move on, and I'm going to talk. I'm going to move back to a story that is just as I described it the other day, is growing arms and legs. It just won't go away. It's this story of the trucking tragedy in Florida. Of course, everybody with an opinion has weighed in on this story. It just will not leave the mainstream media, even across the US. And as I say, in the context of 120 people dying daily on America's roads, why has this one story just hit such a nerve across every aspect of US society? It is, again, because it was a Sikh driver from the Sikh community. And this has ignited the debate about immigration, it's about the whole industry as a whole, etc., etc. And as this story, and of course the media, being the media, they're always looking for the latest juicy story. They need to fill the airtime, they need to generate the clicks, they need to generate interest in their channel. So they're looking for every juicy, nasty, mischievous angle they can just to try and generate engagement. Engagement comes through emotional response. Of course, they're trying to drive emotional response. They're trying to make people angry. They're trying to make people sad. They're basically trying to make people react. And this is why the media coverage has been actually, I would say, slightly controversial on this. Of course, it has come once again down to Sikh organisations in the US just to try and stand up and say, look, please, can everybody just be a little bit more sensible and calm about this? This story is being blown out of proportion from what it actually is. And the Sikh Coalition, of course, stands up. We talk about leading advocates in the US, which organisations are leading advocates. It's not the Khalsa today. It is organisations like the Sikh Coalition who genuinely do stand up for the interests of the Sikh community and have got a long and very high achieving track record of doing so. There's no doubt what the Sikh Coalition stands for. They, of course, as the leading, or certainly one of the leading advocates for the Sikh community, has released a press release, and I'm going to quickly go through it because this sums up really perfectly, I think, the whole issue and what people need to take attention of. Of course, they start this press release saying, of course, that they share their condolences. We're all suffering, obviously not as much as the family itself, but we all suffer in empathy with what's happened here, including particularly the Sikh community suffer in empathy. But what they are saying is, firstly, they warn the Sikh community, look, please be aware, be vigilant. There are all sorts of scams, GoFundMe pages, petitions, attempts to speak on behalf of the community without a verified or transparent source. So be careful, as indeed many of our commenters have said. But what they're saying, the tragedy must not be used as an excuse for bigotry or stereotyping. The actions of one individual does not represent an entire community. Yes, the right wing are jumping on this. Hindutva, of course, are jumping on this and causing mischief. They're seeing it as an easy way to really generate, it's fertile ground to generate anti-Sikh hatred. And so the Sikh Coalition say that please stop this. It is not a reason to generate bigotry or stereotyping. Now, they do talk at length about how important the trucking industry is for the Sikh community. 150,000 Sikhs work in the industry, 90% of the drivers. 30,000 Sikh drivers joined the industry between 2016 and 18. And it just gives a clue of how important the trucking industry is to the Sikh community. But vice versa, how important the Sikh community is to the trucking community, and how important the trucking community is essentially to the lifeline of the United States. It is the supply chain. It is the food supply chain. In other words, you start damaging the Sikh community, you start hurting the Sikh community, you're damaging, it's an own goal. You're damaging your own important supply chain. There are significant impacts of this. So in other words, be warned to the wider public. Don't, as we say in English, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. So what they're saying is, look, they're urging media outlets to report the facts of the case responsibly without resorting to inflammatory language or harmful generalizations about any group. In other words, stop this clickbait attitude to this thing. It is not doing any good. It's fueling division. It's fueling xenophobia, as they say. They've already witnessed, as they say, unabashed anti-Sikh rhetoric and hate emerge online. And interestingly, often from Indian media outlets, social media accounts. We know where that's coming from. We talk about on a daily basis. Yeah, of course, this is Hindutva. Really take advantage of the situation. They say the FBI's most recently released hate crime data report shows that Sikhs remain the third most targeted group in the US. And they also point the finger at the politicians, saying using the tragedy as a way to score political points is reprehensible. Indeed, politicians are waiting and, of course, trying to take advantage of this. They say that they must ensure that policies such as those governing commercial driver's licences are applied fairly without discrimination. We support common sense safety measures. Of course, you need to speak English to a proficient level if you're going to become a truck driver. In other words, the common sense approach, we've had this discussion here on the channel many times about these CDLs, these driving licenses. Of course, there has to be common sense. There has to be sensible safety precautions. You must have a decent level of English if you're going to drive essentially a dangerous weapon like a 100 or whatever, 50, 30-ton truck, or however heavy these things are. In other words, yes, absolutely, the Sikh community totally support normal safety measures. Of course they do. There's common sense in this debate. And as they say, in a time of profound loss and grief, we urge all people to resist the temptation to scapegoat. Of course, in a terrible tragedy like this, of course, we all look for somewhere to blame. We're looking for somebody to blame. There's a natural human urge to want to blame somebody and to channel that anger. But in this situation, do not find a scapegoat. It was a sad, tragic accident. We are all human beings. Every single one of us, without exception, has made mistakes in our lives. There is no exception to that. Every one of you watching this has made a mistake in your life. Nobody's perfect. We're all human beings. This guy made a stupid mistake. 3 people sadly lost their lives, but that's all it was. It was a stupid mistake. He will pay the price for that, but it does not mean that the whole of the United States and whoever else can turn on a whole community saying this is all your fault. It's nonsense. Common sense needs to prevail here. And just a final note on this, Gurpreet Singh Pannu of Sikhs for Justice has actually, of course, unsurprisingly, he's met Harjinder Singh, the accused for this. And he's actually, and this is typical of the Sikh community. Well done to Gurpreet Singh Pannu. He's actually, he said he has announced he's giving $1 lakh to the families of those who died in the accident. So again, this is the community stepping up. He basically represents a large part of the community by doing this. But basically, the community, of course, empathise with the family. As the Sikh Coalition said, of course, it is terrible what has happened. We as a community as a whole empathise as human beings. We are all equal under the eyes of God. Gurpreet Singh Pannu has gone one step further and has actually donated money. Saver. This is all part of Saver again. So again, it just sums up the attitude of the Sikh community. Common sense must prevail. We need to stop and stamp down, particularly it's Hindutva, of course, the primary drivers of this, but the Western media partly guilty as well. So wherever we see it, we've got to stamp down and let's make sure common sense prevails, James.
Absolutely. Now let's keep in mind that with the CDL, or a commercial driver's license, whether that's in Canada or the US, comes a heightened level of responsibility and leadership on the roads. It is really driven into the drivers, no pun intended, the level of responsibility that comes with operating, as you said, a potential weapon. Those trucks do not stop on a dime. They are, they've got to be loaded correctly to provide or to prevent rollovers, and so many other things that people would never even think about when they are just experienced driving their typical family wagon or, family automobile. There is a lot more involved when you're dealing with that. Now, you also have to take a look at the knee-jerk reactions, as you touched on, Angus. We saw that in Canada several years back when an immigrant truck driver had missed a stop sign and killed a group of hockey players in Humboldt, Saskatchewan. Now, there was an initial reaction, of course. There obviously is that emotion that comes out, especially when people lose lives. However, it was also very essential that the investigation process continued and that the justice system handled it on the merits of the individual case, not resulting from the public outcry or political posturing. And that's what this comes down to, is that the community is not saying that he should not be held accountable for his mistake, but they also want to make sure that people understand it was a mistake. He had no intention of harming anybody. He made a poor decision. For that, he will not only have to face the justice system, but he's going to have to face his conscience for the rest of his life. And that is not something that should be overlooked either. However, he should not be facing a court or charges and penalties based on policies of politicians or the emotions of the general public. Instead, people, again, have to take a breath, calm down, and look at the totality of the situation. Now, with the Humboldt truck incident where it hit the bus several years back, they also looked at the trucking company and whether or not they had properly ensured that the driver met the standards to be out on the highway, to in terms or in general be able to go out and train and oversee the drivers, or did they just find a driver, put him in the truck and say go, instead of making sure that they understood everything that was entailed. Again, that does bear some responsibility and on the trucking company. Did this driver get the sufficient time behind the wheel with the company to ensure that he understood the operations of running long haul? And that's what this is. It's different than running a city truck. When you're running long haul, you are on unfamiliar territory. This particular incident happened on a Florida turnpike. So again, there is a level of responsibility with the trucking company. And finally, on that note, I just wanted to remind people that he did not flee prosecution or the police from Florida after the accident. He was not informed to stay in Florida at that time, as he was based out of California and the trucking company was. His boss did the prudent thing to get him home to his family or home to his hometown in order to get the support that he was obviously going to need after such a tragic event. So he was not fleeing anything. He was actually going home where he has to process what's happened as well. So I think that's also very important for people to understand and to get the word out, because some people are still erroneously or intentionally misrepresenting his return to California, Angus.
Indeed, and one story I always like to trot out when it comes, we talk about the law, as I said yesterday or a couple of days ago, the law must always be enacted dispassionately. It must be, any emotion and human emotion must be removed. The law must be enacted completely equally. About 30 years ago, there was a big situation of paedophilia going on, and big vigilante groups were going around the UK targeting paedophiles and attacking their homes and everything, driven by the media, as it turned out. And there was a doctor, a paediatrician, who was attacked, and their home was burnt, I think, burnt to the ground, because they couldn't understand the difference between a paedophile and a paediatrician. It sounded the same. Yeah, they must be the same type of people. Of course, they're not. A child doctor against a paedophile. But that's why you must not let the mob enact mob justice. The mob is actually, frankly, with all due respect to the mob, is not intelligent enough to enact justice properly. It must be left to the experts, the legal profession, the law. That is why the law must be allowed to do its thing dispassionately. Anyway, James, let's move on to my second story, and I'll have to rush through this one quickly now because we're running out of time as always. Let me quickly play. This is the two taxi drivers in Wolverhampton here in the UK, the Midlands, UK, who were attacked. I just want to quickly play you that they were interviewed a couple of nights ago, Tuesday night, by the BBC. Let me just quickly play you this interview. For those who don't know the details of the story, this is a very quick way and a very easy way just to fill in everything that you want to know about this story.
Good afternoon. Two taxi drivers say they fear they could have been killed in what police are treating as a racially aggravated assault. Satnam Singh and Jaspir Sangha were attacked outside Wolverhampton train station earlier this month. They say it was unprovoked and has left them in a lot of pain. British Transport Police say a 17-year-old boy and two men, aged 19 and 25, have been arrested. Amy Cole has been speaking to the victims.
Looking back at the footage captured by a bystander and shared on social media, Jaspir Sangha and Satnam Singh are still shocked by what happened to them. Both men are taxi drivers and were on duty outside Wolverhampton railway station when three men allegedly approached Satnam and started making demands. They say the men were swearing and using racist language. They pushed Satnam to the ground before turning on his friend who had tried to intervene.
Satnam, we see in the video that your turban has been removed during the attack. How did that make you feel?
When I look, I have no turban on my head. That means I am feeling all the time that time I am feeling I am dead. You know, my turban is main. I will never ever off the turban.
So you'd never remove your turban normally, so you
No.
felt like you were dead, almost not having it on.
Yeah, what happened to me? That's why I am feeling dead.
Jaspir says he was punched in the face and then
All three of them jumped at me and I was just trying to defend myself. It happened so quick and I was on the floor. And all I see is afterwards, one of the guys was kicking me like anything. Could have happened anything. I could have been killed then.
he suffered 2 broken ribs and says he's in a lot of pain.
Even you try to sit down, get up. When you sneeze, it's a killer, like shock to your body. If you cough, it's hell of a pain. And you can't, I've been sitting here, sleeping, try to sleep, and can't sleep on the bed.
The Sikh Federation says the government must do more to protect the Sikh community.
A year on now, we've still not seen any engagement from government with organisations like the Sikh Federation or Gurdwaras in general to set up reporting centres in Gurdwaras to understand how to protect our elderly, our young, the vulnerable aspects of our community, because we've seen not only attacks like with the one we saw in Wolverhampton, but there are an increase in bullying on Sikh children in schools, in colleges, and all of this is going unreported and the community is feeling neglected.
The men were grateful that some people did come to their aid.
Yeah, 2 ladies. One is young, one is oldish. They are white ladies, but they are very helpful, very, very helpful.
Has it left you feeling scared to go back to work?
Yes, I'm scared.
Would you consider maybe not going back to work?
No, I am going to back, but feeling is no good. Still scared.
Amy Cole with that report, and we've contacted the Department for Housing, Communities and Local Government for comment and awaiting their response.
Now that final statement, that's the bit I really want to focus on because it speaks volumes. And this is actually why the Sikh community are starting to get a little bit unhappy with what's going on with this whole story. Of course, it was a terrible attack. Why has the government not responded? Why has the government not even made a statement about this? Even the BBC, our national broadcaster, has approached the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, Angela Rayner, and said, well, what are you going to say about it? Silence, devastating silence. Yet, if these had been 2 Muslims who'd been attacked, there would have been statements, there would have been all sorts of, loads of media coverage, but certainly the government would have stepped up and I've no doubt Surrender Starmer, would have been at his lectern in front of number 10 Downing Street giving great long speeches about how terrible it was. But because it was a Sikh, silence. Unsurprisingly, and well done to Jas Singh, again, from the Sikh Federation, once again, just calling it out for what it is. Why is the government not stepping up and talking about this? And once again, the Sikh community here in the UK is feeling let down. And of course, the previous government, the Conservative government, rightly so, had a lot of ire focused at it from the Sikh community, and because traditionally the Conservative Party didn't really seem to care much about the Sikh community. But the Labour government, with whom actually got into power thanks to the Sikh vote here in the UK, have completely ignored the Sikh community, all its issues ever since gaining power a year ago. Now, unsurprisingly, Sikh organisations like Sikh Federation are, in a very diplomatic and organisational way, approaching officially, saying, could you please make a statement? They are being ignored. Why? These are the key representatives of the Sikh community in the UK are being ignored, as indeed are the BBC. Why? Why is the Labour government not apparently even caring about its Sikh community? And there's a couple of comments on social media actually after the Sikh Federation posted this up. And I think this actually sums it up. Vic Singh says, is the penny dropping? Labour don't care about Sikhs. Yes, finally. And I hate to say I told you so, but I told you so. I've been saying this for a long time. In fact, since Keir Starmer got into power, they don't really care about the Sikh community. They wanted your votes. They don't care about you. And SS also commented, Labour don't care about Sikhs. They see us as compliant. Unlike the Muslim vote, we can be ignored. And this is why Angela Rayner is leading a secretive Islamophobia definition working group to make the society worse but give Muslims blasphemy law type protection. Sikh MPs are useless. And here's the clue. Why does our Islamic population here in the UK have a disproportionate amount of support, help, attention from the British government as opposed to the Sikh community? Is it because we have a much larger Islamic population who of course support Labour? It could well be. Is it because the Islamic population have a very powerful activist lobby? Yes, definitely. That is certainly a contributory factor. So why is the Sikh community being ignored? I think the clue is here in SS's comment. They see us as compliant. It's because Sikhs are good citizens. They comply. They stay within the law, generally speaking. Of course, every society has its fringe elements. But generally speaking, the Sikh community is seen as law-abiding. It is seen as a hugely contributing part of British society. It is seen as being good. It keeps quiet, in other words. It doesn't cause trouble. That is what good citizens do. They just get on with their lives. They don't cause trouble. They support and contribute to society. That is what Sikhs do. Now, the Muslims are not being anti-Islamic here, but the Islamic society in the UK has a few of its problems. And we've talked about those grooming gangs, for example. They cause problems on their fringe elements. That's why they maybe get more attention. But the Sikh community as a whole is a law-abiding, positive part of British society. They don't cause problems. They are, quote SS, they are compliant. Maybe that's why. But there are so many big issues that the Sikh community care about that are important to the Sikh community. Of course, we talk about the 1984 the investigation that was promised by Keir Starmer and still not delivered, not even mentioned, never mind delivered, not even mentioned. We talk about Jagtar Singh Johal, still in prison, many, many years, detained arbitrarily by the Indian government. Keir Starmer, David Lammy, useless, incompetent, doing absolutely nothing about it except talk about it whenever they're asked about it, but they deliver nothing. All these issues matter to the Sikh community. Hate crime. There is a lot of hate crime against the Sikh community, and this a prime example, there's hate crime against Islamic sections of society as well. That gets attention, but hate crime against the Sikh community doesn't. Why not? James, why is our British Sikh community not treated as well as they are in Canada? That's a good question.
Exactly. And let's face it, when you have such incidents that take place, it really is the role of government to act as a leader, to come forward, to speak out against the racism, to speak out against the hate, to speak out against such actions happening in the streets, but also to praise the victims in their bravery to come forward and speak publicly, to educate and raise awareness of this problem. And finally, of course, government also plays a role that they should be recognizing these women who are heroes for coming to the aid of two individuals in need, and take race right out of the equation, or religion and background. Just two people who came forward in a dangerous situation to help two other individuals in need. I mean, where is the compassion and the respect of government in speaking about this in all of those regards, Angus?
Indeed, and I'll just reiterate Vic Singh's comment, is the penny dropping. Labour don't care about Sikhs, and I hate to say it, but again, I told you so. Yes, indeed. And on that note, James, let's move on to our comments column as the clock marches down towards the end of the show. We're going to zip through these as quickly as usual, sadly. Yes, we talked a lot about the truck driver. Of course, a lot of our commenters in the audience had a lot of opinions about this. Punjab says, Fox News said driver of truck was illegal, and yet Mr. Mann says, but Panoon actually clarified it, said Singh wasn't illegal. And this highlights the main problem here, is that what is the truth? The media, of course, right-wing media, Fox News said, oh, of course he was illegal. But in fact, the truth came out. Panoon said, no, he was legal. There's so much false information flying around the media, James.
Yeah, and I spoke of that last night, in all of this false narrative that's being pushed about this individual driver. And unfortunately, I think that there is a big play behind it to really divide the community further when it comes to anybody perceived as different in an agenda that some have about immigration policy.
Indeed, there's a lot of mischief being generated by a few sources, primarily by Hindutva, who are loving this situation. They really are taking advantage of the situation to generate this anti-Sikh hatred wherever they get the opportunity. But of course, it's the Western media that are actually equal as well, equally guilty of doing this. And Hardal Singh says, look, just let the law do its thing, like we talked about. But Charming Hope does actually say, look, what's different between the Godi media and the Western media? The Western media is actually acting just as irresponsibly about this. So indeed, yeah, this debate goes on. I think it's interesting how this story has just, as I use the word mushroom, it really has grown into something very different. It's actually saying, look, this is highlighting just firstly how easy it is to generate division and hatred in society, and secondly, Western media just needs to have a little bit of introspection and say, look, hang on, look at yourselves. Are you really reporting these things in the right way? So, anyway, Safdie Muppins, and we talked about Baba Khalsa International. Yeah, thank you for these two comments. Till now, as a Punjabi Sikh, I always think of Baba Khalsa International, whereas I think this could be the B team of the RSS. And Mr. Mann also says, look, BKI stands for Bharti Kata International, run by Indian agencies. Now, I've not done a huge amount of research into BKI, other than they are a designated pro-Khalistani terrorist organisation. They've been around for a long time, actually. I think almost even, since the early 20th century, I believe. But it's interesting, this I didn't know this, and thank you for your contributions on this, that there is accusations that in fact they are actually another front of Indian intelligence to create division and create false flag incidents, James.
Yeah, and they are also banned in Canada and recognized as a terrorist organization as well, and have been for quite some time. So there's always been that question of whether or not they are influenced or even created by the Hindutva media as well, with the foothold in there.
Yeah, it does make, it's interesting, these comments, because it does make you wonder, yeah, maybe this whole operation is funded, ironically, by Indian intelligence just to try and generate, or essentially create the story that the Khalistan movement is a bunch of terrorists. Well, if it's not, let's create some, let's fund them ourselves. So who knows, could be. And a few more, I dived into our shorts as well for a few more comments, because I do tend to really not give our shorts enough attention in the comments column. The interview I did with Dr. Grewal. Thank you, SSK Trucking, for your comment. Satluj TV is killing the Indian state Bambalbusa narrative. I had to look up this word. It basically means comedy or humorous narrative. Thank you for that. Our people are able to see the hidden enemy. Absolutely. Thank you for saying Satluj TV is killing the narrative. I certainly hope so, James. Hopefully we are getting the truth out there.
It seems to be working, so we'll just keep doing what we do, is one of the many cogs that make the machine work. And
Jagtar Sidhu, this comment appeared on several videos actually, but it basically wraps up, I think, about 10 subjects all in one brief sentence or one paragraph. Salute to Panoon of America. Referendum is the only solution. Never forget, of course, we talked about Sikhs, always remember, but don't forget June, November 1984. We are Sikhs, not Hindus. East Punjab is surrounded by the corrupt and dishonest leaders since 1947. Absolutely. So I think there's about 10 whole areas we talk about, big areas we talk about in depth, all in one paragraph. And then Goodell Singh, Khalsa wraps it up with saying, thanks so much for TV Satluj Media. Well, that's what we're here for, James.
Absolutely, and we love doing it. So we're proud to be able to bring the truth to the masses.
And I was interested on another one of our shorts. Mastan Singh Dulai says, this is the top comment. It said, Amritpal Singh Khalsa Jindabad. And there were 12 likes on this, and this was the top comment. This really highlights the fact, actually, Amritpal Singh, who basically is now a member of the Lok Sabha, despite the fact he is in Dibrugarh jail in Assam in India, for his pro-Khalistan campaigning, his activism, his anti-Delhi activism. But he does represent the Khalistan movement. He campaigned on a pro-Khalistan ticket. And I think it's very indicative, certainly, that our audience put this, Amritpal Singh Khalsa. I wasn't quite sure how, as a snapshot of our audience, how they felt about Amritpal Singh. I think this makes it very clear, our audience on the whole, very pro-Amritpal Singh, and therefore, by extension, pro-Khalistan, James.
Absolutely, and I think that really is a quick summary of it. And we could go on about Amritpal Singh for probably, a whole week worth of shows in terms of where he's at and our audience and participation in terms of comments. So again, yeah, it is, people got to stand up and say, let's get him out because it's time.
Indeed, and the final page. This is a story that wrote itself. Really, this is a short about the flooding, and I'm going to go through these because, as I say, this story writes itself. Brahmin stands centre-controlled government treating Punjab as a colony. 78 years after the power transfer from the British to the Hindu Brahmins. Yeah, you get it, Mr. Man. That is exactly what happens. India uses dams and rivers as a weapon against the Punjab. Of course they do. Whereas C5H, Jagtar Sidhu. Delhi governments are the #1 enemy of Punjab. Referendum is the only solution. Yeah, you're right. Because they are weaponising the water. Is it incompetence? Is it deliberate? It almost doesn't matter, but they are weaponising water against the people of the Punjab. So the only solution is a referendum to free Punjab. Why? Because Bobby Singh says, the only resolution is Khalistan because Khalistan, the Punjab, is being robbed of their own resources, culture and language. And MK, something or other, says the only solution, once again, for all Punjab problems is independence from India. We need to make our own decisions. We need to control our own water, amongst many other things. Karam Singh says, all kinds of water flowing like this will be controlled and used systematically in Khalistan. In other words, if we're allowed to make our own decisions, we can manage this water so much better. Mastan Singh Dulai likewise says the solution is Khalistan. Bachchan Kaur Bachchan wraps it all up by saying, I love you, Khalistan Punjab. So as I said, James, that story writes itself.
Absolutely. Remember, water is such an essential part of the life cycle, and especially of humans. And who's greater at protecting the human life and quality than the Sikhs? Nobody. Let's make sure that Khalistan happens.
Indeed. So that whole narrative about the flooding and the water supply and the mismanagement basically is in itself that complete snapshot of why Khalistan needs to be established. And, well, as I said, it writes itself. Khalistan Zindabad. We must all campaign to allow the people of the Punjab to make their own decisions about everything, not just the water, but about every social aspect of their lives, about everything. That is why Khalistan is an absolute imperative and, I believe, an inevitability as well. But on that note, Khalistan Zindabad, we must leave perspectives for another day and indeed another week. So thank you, as always, for joining us and staying loyal to us. Please spread the word. Tell more people about our existence. Don't forget to keep those comments coming in. Of course, they really do make us keep going. You guys write the story for us, and it's great, your contributions. So please do keep this coming in. Let us know your opinions, your thoughts, your criticisms about anything that we talk about and anything you'd like us to talk about. Don't forget you can message us directly at message@satlugetv.com if there's anything you want to bring to our attention directly. But that is it for another week. Thanks so much for watching. It is a goodbye from me. It is a goodbye from James.
Stay safe, everyone.
You have, of course, been watching Perspectives. We will see you next time.